All right, join us now is Dan Ives. He's the Managing Director of Equity Research over at Wedbush Securities. Dan, thanks a lot for taking the time. Obviously, the story that has been top of mind for many investors, not just this week, but throughout all of last year, is asking themselves what has happened with Tesla stock. Earlier this week, we're coming off one of the biggest one-day drops for the stock in more than 2 years. The stock continues to fall. Why is now not the time to bail on Tesla as a stock?
Look, I mean, it was a Cinderella ride for Tesla since really going back 2017, 2018. And I think now, if you look at what's really happened with Musk and Twitter, that's, in our opinion, probably about 70% of the sell-off. I mean, brand deterioration, the antics we've seen on Twitter, the focus on the attention on Twitter and not Tesla, that spider web along with selling Tesla stock, that was sort of the first step down. And the second, as we saw this week, it's the demand story. I mean, demand's starting to soften, and we're seeing it across technology, across automotive. And now for Tesla, for the first time in many years, backs against the wall. They need to navigate. And that's why you see investors just selling the stock left and right. I believe it's oversold. I believe we look back, it's an opportunity. But ultimately, a lot of it's Musk. He started the fire. He's the only one that could extinguish it.
So you are confident here that it's oversold given its current level. That will lead a lot of people to wonder where that buying opportunity is. What do you tell someone who's looking at where the price is, may have even looked at the price a couple of weeks ago and said, well, surely this is the buy level, right? And now it seems as if there's kind of new lows that it continues to reach. How do you see this playing out, especially on the backdrop of all the other macroeconomic headlines that a lot of names will likely be battered by as 2023 rolls along?
I mean, it's the same conversation I'd have with investors in 2009 that said Apple was a one-hit wonder on iPhone, and now it was going to be the next BlackBerry at 300 billion, and then it hit 3 trillion, right? Or Microsoft going back to 2002, 2003, saying that story was done. So the point is, like, my view in covering tech 22 years, I've seen it before. I think the transformational growth themes, they always get oversold. They get thrown in the garbage. But I look at Tesla as we're in the second inning of EVs. 2.5% of autos today are EVs. My view that goes to 10, 12% in 2025 and 25% end of the decade. There's going to be many winners, GM, Ford, a lot of the European players. But this is ultimately a company where they're going through, and a lot of it's self-inflicted, just growing pains. So I just don't view that this is the end of the Tesla story. I actually just view it's just a painful interim speed bump that ultimately they can navigate.
You're right. So maybe compared to a football team that's kind of getting clobbered there in the second quarter, knowing that, hey, there's still a lot more of the game left to play. Perhaps sounds as if that's kind of the picture that you're painting. Earlier this week, you and your colleague over at Wedbush, you wrote an updated note, and I do want to read from it. You wrote, "This is a fork in the road year ahead for Tesla that will either lay the groundwork for its next chapter of growth or continue its slide from the top of the perch with Elon Musk leading the way downhill." Which of those two outcomes do you think is more likely, and how soon might we expect some of that to actually happen?
I think it starts January 25th on earnings. I mean, they have to clear the deck, give hittable and beatable numbers. It can't be a death by 1,000 cuts, lower numbers every quarter. That's the first step. 2, gotta name a CEO of Twitter. Need arm's length situation here. Musk is a big part of the story. I mean, you'd have to maybe say Jobs and Apple, Jack Welch and GE. But I mean, even those are sort of comparison. I mean, Musk is Tesla, Tesla is Musk. And the third thing is give investors confidence that there's no more stock sales, because that ultimately has been a big overhang that's kind of created the perfect storm. And Musk has essentially done what no conspiracy theory, no short, no competitor could do. And that's why it's a big part of the sell we've seen in Tesla.
How soon should Elon Musk vacate his position at Twitter?
I think he has to do before earnings, Jan 25th. I mean,
you think this in the next few weeks?
Yeah, if this continues into February, March, then you start to get boy that cry wolf Pinocchio. Okay, we're just going to sit here and he's going to linger on. Clock struck midnight. Investors are frustrated. We're obviously frustrated. We've talked about it because they have fundamental issues that they're dealing with. You see them sort of coming off some of the growth, hyper growth we've seen. They need Musk in the pilot seat navigating the storm. not a Ted Stryker situation.
When you look at the market out of China, how worrying is it for you when you look at names like Neo and Xpeng, just to try and dig down on some of those more specific competitors in that market, which obviously has dealt with its own headwinds? And how concerning are those challenges from where you sit in your approach to looking at Tesla as a stock?
Yeah, look, it's a great point. China's the hearts and lungs of the Tesla story. It's a big part of the softness that we've seen. Competition's increasing. There's clearly going to be more price cuts. But look, I still view that that's a market that's still in the kind of, we'll call it third, fourth inning of the electric vehicle race. I think that continues to be just a massive opportunity for Tesla. But no doubt, in the global macro, in this sort of darker backdrop, Tesla's feeling the pain. And I think that's reflected in deliveries that we saw this week. And it's a big part of the sell-off that we've seen because investors just worry what's around the corner.
Elon Musk has said that the long-term fundamentals of the company remain extremely strong. Based on what I'm hearing from you, it sounds as if you're still pretty confident that that's the case, but a lot of things kind of need to change pretty soon for that to still hold. Is that a fair read?
I think it's a fair look. Anytime you go from hyper growth to more moderate growth, it's always tough. And I think it's just a different form of maturity that Tesla's going through. We're not talking 300,000 cars. We're talking toward 2 million this year. On the goal, it's starting to get to 4 or 5 million when we look at a few years. So you got to start to see $4.50, $5 earnings power. In a softer macro, if they could grow 35, 40% in what's likely a recessionary environment, that's really strong. And now it's starting to trade toward, EBITDA levels of automotive players. I view it as a disruptive technology player. But look, there's a lot of investors out there. They were negative on the stock when it was 30 billion. They were negative at $1 trillion. They're going to be negative at 350 billion. It's just, we're in one of those cycles where there's a lot of piling on and yelling fire in a crowd theater, and ultimately till proven innocent. And that's what Tesla needs to do.
I know you believe that Twitter should get a new leader, but at what point do you think that Tesla should consider a new leader?
I mean, look, at the end of the day, Tesla is Musk. Musk is Tesla. Saban, Alabama. Belichick, New England. I mean, the point is, those are some of the that's not going to change anytime soon, but need Musk to be focused on Tesla and not this, Twitter situation, which has really been some brand deterioration, political firestorm, and sort of added to the soap opera.
Finally, what do you think is most misunderstood or mischaracterized about this conversation? Dan, you are as tapped in to the business news cycle conversation about this company. And I wonder from where you sit, do you ever have the sense that this is kind of being misframed or misunderstood that you would want to sort of correct the record about publicly, I wonder?
Look, I think the biggest thing that's misframed is just looking at the situation in a sort of 1 to 2 quarter cycle. I think you have to look at the broader multi-year vision. And I just go back to Apple 2009, investors telling me, this is the next BlackBerry. iPhone was a one-hit wonder. Look where we are today. Microsoft going back to 03, 04. Windows is done. They're basically going to be a legacy of Sun Microsystems. Look where we are now. So those experiences, at least personally, and I mean, at least that's our view. I mean, there's no reason that Tesla is not a $1.5, $2 trillion type company over the coming years. It's just going through obviously a brutal macro and a lot of it's self-inflicted must.
Dan, I really appreciate your perspective. The great
Thanks
Dan Ives. Thanks a lot for taking the time.